Have you logged into your student loan account recently and thought, what in the world am I supposed to do now? Maybe you've received notices about switching repayment plans. Maybe you've been seeing payment estimates that don't make any sense. Or maybe you've heard so many conflicting opinions that you've decided to ignore the whole thing until someone tells you exactly what to do. Well, keep listening as we walk you through what's happening with student loans right now and what physicians should be considering. Hello, and welcome to the Wealth Minded MD podcast with your money best friends. I'm Dr. Alicia Taylor.
And I'm Dr. Brittany Helford.
And of course, we're here to help you build wealth and make good money decisions so you can create the life you desire with more control over your time. As physicians, one of the most important things that we can do is make sure that we secure our income. That means that if we were, for some reason, unable to work due to a car accident, a medical illness, a chronic condition, mental health disorder, that we still have money coming in. Because a lot of our financial plans are contingent on our high doctor income. And so one of the things that you will need to do is make sure that you get long-term disability insurance. And I know, as well as anybody, that getting this is not necessarily fun, and all insurance agents are not created equal. However, Pradeep Otto and his team at PKA Insurance Group are different. They are who you want to contact if you need long-term disability insurance or life insurance. They have a reputation of putting people over profits and always doing what's best. If you're in need of life insurance or disability insurance, be sure to reach out to Pradeep and his team today. They will help you get the insurance you need with the service you deserve. All right, Brittany, you said you was gone and then you back. So what's going on, girl? How have you been?
I am blessed and busy, but I'm happy to be here on the mic with you and see your beautiful face. Yeah, things are good. How have you been?
Girl, busy, okay? Every single day I'm looking and I've gotten like 20 things on my calendar. People put meetings on my calendar. The word has gotten out that I'm full-time, even though I don't see patients full-time. And so on my admin days, people are like, ooh, we know she's off and she should be working. And so she should be available. I'm like, when did this meeting pop up? When did that meeting pop up? As we're recording this, I just attended one of the graduations because, the residency year is ending. And so people are graduating. It was so funny. I was sitting next to one of my colleagues and she was like, are you going to the general GME graduation? And I was like, girl, I didn't know there was a general GME graduation. I thought it was just program specific, family medicine, pediatrics, etc. And she was like, no, there's a general one. You should go. And I was like, should I? And she was like, yeah, I think it's happening on your admin day. And I was like, well, I guess I'll be there. I'm saying this to say that I ended up going and I got an award. That's why she wanted me to be there, because she was like, you're getting an award and we want you to show up for this award. And this ceremony is when you should be working anyway. And so it was just funny, but it worked out for me.
Well, congratulations. June is that type of month. And I know your birthday's coming up in June, so that's even extra busy for little Dr. Alicia Taylor.
Girl, don't get me too hype.
But yeah, June with graduations, open houses, people getting married, and then we have all of the school programming things. Even if you're not graduating, there still seems to be more events in June. So I completely understand where you're coming from, and I'm happy that you at least had that time paid to go to the graduation ceremony while you're getting an award. But I'm also a little sad that people are putting things on your calendar, because I think when you have so many meetings, it's like, wait, when do I do the stuff from the meeting? Like, yes, we had a meeting about this and I actually need to take some action. So when do I do those action steps? So that always gets me after meetings.
Yeah, no, same. I mean, by the time this airs, it'll probably be July. So hopefully things will have settled down, but I'm not sure because, this is a period of transition, if you will, not only for you and I, but also for like just doctors in general. This is the time where people are changing jobs or finishing training, starting new training programs, progressing in their training. And so there's a lot that tends to happen in the summer months as everybody's trying to go on vacation. So then, of course, you send an email and you get their automated response like, so-and-so is going to be back 2 weeks from now. And you're like, great. All right. Hope I can make it during that time. Anyway, so we know that this is a busy time, but also there is something else that is happening that is making it a stressful time for a lot of people. And that is this whole thing with student loans. We've been getting these notices. Well, not you, because you remind us every chance that you get that you don't have student loans anymore.
That's right. I'm dancing in my chair, people.
But for those of us who aren't as fortunate, we are not God's favorite. No, I'm just kidding. We still have student loans. And so we've got to figure out what we're going to do. And there's a lot of change happening, right? There's a lot of transition happening. Some plans leaving, some plans being restarted, some plans opening up. The plans that are supposed to be there aren't there. There's a lot happening. And I find, Brittany, I don't know if this has been your experience, where there's like two camps of doctors. There's the doctors who are semi-informed and they're like, hey, I know that this change is happening. I need to figure out what I need to do. And I get texts from those people, Alicia, what should I do? What are you doing? And then there's also a group of people that are like oblivious to everything or don't care. And they're like, I didn't even know that was happening, to be honest with you, girl. Those loans gonna get paid off when Jesus comes back. They're just like, you know what? Out of sight, out of mind. They're not getting their money back. It's not even part of their financial plan. So there's two camps of doctors. And I think that whichever camp you are in, especially if those people happen to be listening to this podcast episode with you and I, hopefully we can give the people some clarity, some direction, some strategy on what to do next.
Yeah, Alicia, it is really funny how much people are aware because there's been so much in the headlines recently. I feel like every day there's like a student loan headline, and some of them are just a reiteration of last week news, right? But with all of that in the media, people are becoming more aware and they feel more overwhelmed. Because what I find is like the studentaid.gov website is not providing adequate guidance. The repayment calculators are not there to incorporate this new RAP plan. And people are even more anxious because it's new. And so even those who are doing nothing, I think they're also doing nothing because of analysis paralysis and just overwhelmed. They don't know what next step to take.
I agree with you. I agree with you. So let's give the people some clarity. That's why they came to us, girl. And so let's give them some clarity. The first things first is like, I think we should all get on the same page of what is actually changing right now. I know some people have ignored their student loans or maybe they're scared to log in. They're like, I don't even want to see that number. So let's just give the people some updates on what's going on. I think the first thing or the first kind of update is that the SAVE plan is effectively ending. It's gone. It was challenged in court. It's been largely halted. People who were either switched into that plan automatically or who elected to be on that plan years ago, they're going to have to take action. And so a lot of people like the SAVE plan because it offered lower monthly payments and it had some interest benefits and it had a quicker path towards student loan forgiveness. But now that that plan is ending, borrowers are going to need a new strategy. So number one, the SAVE plan is gone. Number two is that borrowers can't stay in this sort of forbearance that they're in forever. For those who were in the SAVE plan, they were automatically placed in this sort of forbearance period where they didn't have to pay on their student loans, but also none of those sort of months were counting towards public service loan forgiveness. And for some people, they were like, well, that's fine with me. As long as you're not making me pay anything, I'm gonna go on about my life, and maybe they haven't paid on their student loans since 2019. And now it's 2026. They're like, at this point, do they really expect a payment? And the answer is yes, right? For people who were not on the SAVE plan, they had already started making new payments. But for people who were in this sort of SAVE plan forbearance sort of pause period, now they've come out and they said, hey, you're going to have to take some action. You can't stay in this forbearance for forever. And then the next sort of update is that there are different repayment options. We talked about how SAVE plan has ended. The pay-as-you-earn plan still exists, but it's going to go away in 2028. And then they're removing a part of the plan. So a little part of that plan is tweaking a little bit. The income-based repayment is staying the same, but there's two sort of versions of that. There's this new RAP plan that you mentioned, the Repayment Assistance Plan that's emerging, right? So we've got new repayment options that are coming on the scene. And then lastly, the last update is that not everybody should do the same thing, right? What might be best for one person might not be best for another person. And you've got to figure, okay, well, where do I land in this? And so if you're listening to this podcast and you're hearing this for the first time, you need to know, number one, the SAVE plan is ended. Number two, you can't stay in this forbearance for forever. Number three, there are different repayment options, and you're going to need to know what those repayment options are. And number four, not everybody should do the same thing. So what might work best for one person might not be the best move for you.
Alicia, that's a lot. Student loans are always complicated. You and I, even though I don't have student loans anymore, doing a dance again.
The little brag is unnecessary.
My feet have been kind of in the student loan waters because, with finances, many physicians graduate with a heavy burden of student loans. And so that has always been an issue for providers. But historically, there was a little bit more stability, or there was one change that people just had to think about. But now, as you've listed, there are essentially four changes that is causing a lot of chaos and a lot of confusion, especially as things are new and emerging with this repayment assistance plan and people just don't know what to do. So I have literally been having conversations with many individuals, physicians who are attending, been in the attending game for some years, resident physicians, nurse practitioners, like across the board of which plan should I choose. They say that I need to pick a new plan, but I don't know what to do. I mean, I was loving not paying anything. And now they say I gotta pay $800 to $2,000. What? That's not in my budget. I've already accounted for that money elsewhere. So not only is it a cognitive decision that people have to make now, where okay, I have to choose a plan and I don't know which plan, what the differences are between the plans, but it's also a financial and a life shift, maybe if people have not been accounting for this new student loan payment.
I agree with you. I was going to say, I don't know about you, but I do know about you, and you don't have a student loan payment. For someone like myself who hasn't paid on their federal loans in a long time, going from paying nothing to paying potentially 2, 3 grand a month is a big change. Even for me, even for somebody who is a physician who makes multiple six figures, who is in a good financial position, still paying 2, 3 grand a month when I was previously paying zero is definitely a shift. And so I know that for a lot of people, they are feeling that crunch. One of the things that I wanted to make crystal clear is when people have to take action. I've gotten these frantic texts from friends that are like, what do I do now? When do I have to make a change? The general rule of thumb is that a lot of people have been getting these notices from the Department of Education or from studentaid.gov saying, hey, you got to take action. Hey, you got to take action. But if you read the fine print on a lot of those notices, what they say is you have 90 days from the date in which your loan servicer contacts you to make a change. And so for a lot of people, they're like, I don't really understand what that means. And so remember, for people who have federal student loans, so you filled out that FAFSA form to get the student loan money that you needed to go to school. If you have federal student loans, so if you did all of that, your loans are owned by the federal government, but they are not serviced or managed by the federal government. The federal government doesn't have the bandwidth to do that. And so they contract out that work with loan servicers. These are the companies like Nelnet. These are the companies like Ed Financial. These are the companies like Mohila. These are the companies like Navion. These are the companies like Great Lakes. And so those companies are going to contact you and say, hey, you've got to do something. You've got to switch plans. And so you have 90 days from the time in which those companies contact you in order to switch plans. And for some people, they're like, well, what happens if I don't? What they gonna do? How they gonna get their money? Are they gonna get their money? Do I just keep on doing what I'm doing? And from what I have heard is that if you do nothing, you will be automatically placed onto one of these graduated standardized plans that are also coming out, but those plans do not qualify for public service loan forgiveness. And so for some people that are like, oh my gosh, I'm used to doing nothing and then they switch me automatically and I'm just gonna let them switch me, you might not want to do that, especially if you are somebody who is planning on public service loan forgiveness. So the first thing that you need to know is that, yes, you are going to have to take action. You have about 3 months to take action. So this isn't something that you need to do today, but it is something that you do need to be thinking about. And if you let that deadline pass without taking action, your loans might get switched into a plan that doesn't qualify for federal loan forgiveness.
Yeah, and this is specifically for those who are in the safe forbearance because student loans are just so complicated. There are people who are in extended graduated repayment plan, which basically is you start your payments very low and then they go over 25 years. Like those people might be grandfathered in, but that still may not be the best option for you. And so what a lot of people are doing is they're just kind of deferring the decision to the government to decide what's best for you. And Leisha and I are on this podcast telling you that that might not be the best option. Okay. We want you to be able to make an informed decision. And if you are automatically enrolled, as Leisha highlighted, in one of these standard repayment options, then that payment is based on your loan amount. That is not based on your income. Okay. So, we're going to talk about some of the differences between the different plans, but oftentimes the income driven repayment option has a lower monthly amount than the standard repayment option. And so, if you're like Leisha, you're like, I've been enjoying life. I've been going to the Maldives.
You don't have to put me out like that because I didn't even pay full price for that trip. So I don't even know why I caught a stray there and I didn't need to catch a stray. Okay, we can focus on the people.
I wanted to be with you in the Maldives. I'm jealous. Okay. So you're hearing a little bit of that coming out. But the point still lands that if you haven't been making a payment for a while, you don't want them to auto enroll you in a standard repayment option because that payment amount is likely going to be a lot higher than an income driven repayment amount. It may. There are situations where it's not. And so that's why it's really important for you to understand your numbers.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's a great point, Brittany, because I think for a lot of people, they're like, okay, I need to take action. I might need to switch plans. And even if you weren't in the save forbearance, maybe you were in income based repayment, maybe you're in pay as you earn, maybe you're in income contingent repayment, maybe you're in some other plan, right? At some point, you're going to have to recertify your income. And when you recertify your income, it's going to give you an opportunity of, do I want to stay on this exact same plan or do I want to switch plans? And so everybody's going to need to know about these different repayment options because maybe you're in one plan, but maybe another plan might be better for you. Maybe that other plan might save you money. Maybe that other plan might get you closer to forgiveness, whether it's public service loan forgiveness or some other sort of federal loan forgiveness program. And so you need to be aware of what your options are. So let's spend a little time, Brittany, maybe talking about what people's options are, and then we can talk about what we recommend that different people in different scenarios do. So the first thing is sort of the existing options. So I kind of group that as pay as you earn and income based repayment. So pay as you earn, not everybody qualifies for this plan, but for those who do, it bases your monthly payment on 10% of your discretionary income. What is your discretionary income? It's like your adjusted gross income minus the poverty line for your state and your family size, essentially. So it basically gives you a little leeway. They're like, okay, how much do you make per year? How much would a person like you need to live on bare bones? And then we'll take 10% of what's left over. So it gives you a little bit of a cushion. And because it takes 10% of your discretionary income instead of 10% of your adjusted gross income, you have to pay a lower amount. So for a lot of people, if you qualify for pay as you earn, is probably going to be your cheapest plan option. The problem is not everybody used to qualify for that plan. It used to be that pay as you earn, in order to enroll into that plan, you basically had to show that you had some sort of partial financial hardship. And I'll try not to get too into the weeds, but essentially the government wanted to say like, hey, is this plan actually going to benefit you? And for most people, the math generally worked out where do you have more student loans than you make in income? So if you're somebody that has $300,000 in student loans and you make $200,000, you're probably going to qualify. However, if you're somebody that has $100,000 in student loans and you make $300,000, you're probably not going to qualify. So if the amount that you owed exceeded the amount that you made, then generally speaking, most people qualified for pay as you earn. That's called that financial hardship qualification that you needed in order to enroll in that plan. They are supposed to be removing that. My experience at the time of this recording is it has not been removed yet. And so hopefully that gets removed and that in which case more people can enroll in pay as you earn. For a lot of people, that's going to be one of the cheaper options. That plan is supposed to be going away in 2028. However, because it's the cheapest option, there's nothing to stop you from enrolling in that plan now. So if you're going on studentaid.gov or you're using some other sort of student loan calculator, simulator, whatever, you will probably find that pay as you earn is probably one of the cheaper plan options. And so if you're qualified for that one, most people are going to come out ahead by choosing that one. Another perk of pay as you earn is that it has a monthly cap. So there is a limit to how high your payment can be. And that monthly cap is usually whatever your payment would have been if you were on a standard 10-year repayment plan. So if you had $200,000 in loans and you were on a standard 10-year repayment plan, they might calculate your monthly payment out to be something like $1,700 or $1,800 a month. And so they would say, okay, you can either pay 10% of your discretionary income or you can pay up to $1,800 a month, whichever is the lowest or whatever. And so for a lot of people that made super high incomes, for a lot of doctors that were making multiple six figures a year, they liked pay as you earn because it allowed them to pay the lowest amount if they were paying based on their income, or it capped their monthly payment once their income increased. And so pay as you earn sort of had a good floor and a good ceiling, if you will. And so a lot of people tended to like that pay as you earn plan. Like I said, they're supposed to be removing that partial financial hardship that prevented a lot of people from qualifying for it. We'll see if they actually do it. But that is one of the plans that still is in existence today that a lot of people might benefit from.
Yeah. Pay as you earn is one that I don't think a lot of people are talking about because it's going to be phasing out in 2028. So, as we discuss the various options, it is one that gives you a little bit of wiggle room for a temporary period of time. And as Leisha highlighted, it has this additional benefit. So, it's 10% of your discretionary income opposed to some of the other plans that we'll talk about, which are just your adjusted gross income. However, when you think about pay as you earn, you have to qualify. And so they kind of have this narrow window of qualifiers. As you mentioned, Leisha, it's kind of like for new borrowers. Okay. So anyone who is taking out loans for the first time in like after 2007. Okay. So I'm a little old. So if I had student loans, I wouldn't qualify for pay as you earn. And you've had to have taken out another loan after 2011. It's essentially, a little bit of a more narrow window, but it is a good temporary option if you're trying to lower your payments and you don't qualify for new income based repayment, which we haven't talked about. So, both of those plans, pay as you earn and new income based repayment, are very similar, where it has a 10% of your discretionary income. And say you're not going for public service loan forgiveness, where your loans will be forgiven after 120 qualifying payments. Say you're going to actually do income driven repayment forgiveness. Both of those have a timeline of 20 years, which is great. So it really can be helpful for those who do not qualify for new income based repayment, which we'll talk about some of the characteristics of that one. But with the caveat that you have to enroll before July 1st, 2027, and that is going to be phasing out in July 1st, 2028. So it's a temporary solution to bridge you over to another plan if you continue to need an income driven repayment option.
Yeah, I like that clarity. And I think, since you already kind of alluded to it, let's talk about income based repayment and how that's a little bit different because income based repayment is very similar to pay as you earn. The issues with it is that there's two types, right? There's old IBR, old income based repayment, and new IBR, new income based repayment. And let me say this caveat first. When people hear these acronyms, income based repayment, income driven repayment, they get the terms confused, and I understand because they sound similar. So let me clarify this. There is an umbrella term that we call income driven repayment. And that basically means any student loan repayment option that bases your monthly payments based on how much money you make instead of how much loans you have, right? So income driven repayment, think of that as an umbrella term. And then there are different types of income driven repayment options. Those types are the new Repayment Assistance Plan, aka the RAP plan, the pay as you earn plan, the income based repayment plan. All of those are types of income driven repayment options. So income driven repayment is an umbrella term. And then there are different types of income driven repayment plans, which are pay as you earn, income based repayment, the new Repayment Assistance Plan, the old SAVE plan sort of falls into that. The old revised pay as you earn plan falls into that. So IBR, income based repayment, is very similar to pay as you earn. One of the things I like about income based repayment is that it is codified into law. Congress signed a law, said income based repayment is a solid payment option. And so that one's not going to change. That one's not going to go away. You know how pay as you earn is being phased out and the Repayment Assistance Plan is being phased in. Income based repayment is here to stay because it was actually codified into the law. And so income based repayment, there's two types, right? One type, depending on when you took out your loans, bases your monthly payment on 10% of your discretionary income. The other type bases your student loan payment on 15% of your discretionary income. Brittany, this is where sort of my annoyance kicks in, is because I am supposed to qualify for new income-based repayment, but when I log into the calculator, it doesn't put it that way. It only qualifies me for old income-based repayment. And I think it's some sort of glitch because it used to show me both options and now it only shows me one. I've run into a lot of people that have the same issue. Alicia, I'm supposed to qualify for pay as you earn. Or maybe they're already on pay as you earn and it's kicking them off unnecessarily. Or they're like, I'm supposed to be on new IBR. Why is it only showing me old IBR as an option? And so this is where sort of the glitches in the system, the sort of transition, things aren't running as smoothly. This is where this kind of kicks in. But why don't you tell the people how it's supposed to go?
Yeah, Leisha, I think that's a good point, right? So I want to just anchor on this for a minute. Sorry, I'm about to stand on my soapbox. Because we know that there are a lot of changes within student loans, but there have been a lot of changes within the government. And so people who are in the Department of Education may not know the details. They may give you inaccurate information of what you need to do with your student loans. Some people have heard that they need to consolidate their student loans in order to get into some of these plans. But if they were to do that, then they would lose previous PSLF credit, public service loan forgiveness credit. So I'm just standing on this soapbox with the bullhorn to say, it is really important for you to understand some of these details because the people who are supposed to be helping you may not have the right information to guide you to the best option for you. And so that's why we're here to help you to better understand some of these nuances so that you can figure that out for yourself, so that you can be a better advocate for yourself, so that you could avoid the mistakes that will have a cost to you and not a cost to the person who might be helping you from the Department of Education. So whenever you're conversing with them, whenever you're going through these calculators, take screenshots, have documented notes, because it could mean thousands of dollars for you. All right. So with that, let me step down.
You are so funny.
And let's talk about IVR. So, Alicia, I think you really articulated well kind of the alphabet soup that is student loans and income driven repayment options. When we think about income based repayment options, there are effectively two types. There is the old one, the legacy Let's call it, make it sound a little bit better. The legacy income based repayment option, which is for anyone who had an existing balance before July 1st, 2014. Okay, so remember that date, July 1st, 2014. So if you had student loans from undergrad that you never paid off and erased that balance, and say you took out your first loan in 2012, but then you took out a new loan in 2015, you would qualify for the legacy income based repayment because you had an existing loan balance before that July 1st, 2014 date. But if you paid it all off, you wiped it clean, your account said zero, and then you opened up a new loan in 2016, then you would qualify for the other plan, which is the new income-based repayment option. Now, I really want to clarify that because I've got a lot of questions about which one would I qualify. I had old loans, I have a mix of loans. If you have a mix, then you are probably in the legacy plan. If you had just a new loan starting at a later date after 2014, then you are in this new income-based repayment. And the reason why that is critical is because the percentage of your discretionary income that is used to calculate your payment is different between the plans, and the forgiveness timeline is different between the plans. So this is a critical distinction for you to understand how much you might pay on your student loans and which option is best for you. So speaking specifically to the legacy plan, that is based on 15% of your discretionary income. So Alicia talked about you get that little extra bonus depending on how many dependents you have, depending on kind of where you live. You get this extra deduction from your adjusted gross income. And so they take that, and 15% of that will be your annual payment. Then you divide that by 12. That's going to give you your monthly payment for your student loans under the old or legacy IBR. And then say you're not going for public service loan forgiveness. You're like, I'm just going to pay my loans a little bit until they're forgiven. That timeline for forgiveness for the legacy plan is 25 years. So that's the major distinction between the two, between the legacy old IBR. And the new IBR is based on 10% of your discretionary income with a forgiveness timeline of 20 years. So those are dramatically different. The new IBR has a lower payment, has a lower, smaller, shorter forgiveness timeline. The distinction between 5 years could be dramatic. The difference between 5% could be dramatic for some individuals.
All right, Brittany, and to clarify, for some people that are listening to this and trying to follow along and trying not to get lost in the weeds, but are kind of like their eyes twinkling a little bit, how does it work for people who consolidated their loans? Maybe they combined all of their loans from each semester of medical school into one giant loan through the Department of Education. Maybe they were told to do this because they knew that if they consolidated their loans as a first-year resident, then they could start their payment clock towards public service loan forgiveness sooner. And so maybe they did take out loans prior to 2014, but then they consolidated their loans maybe in 2018 or 2017.
Yeah, Alicia, that's a great question. So effectively, you do have a new loan in that case, because when you do a consolidation, you're taking your old loans, but you're putting them into a brand new loan that has a new start date. If you were to do that now, I think it would pose a bit of a risk. But anyone who has a new loan starting July 1st of 2026, you effectively only have the repayment assistance plans available to you. So I would not try to consolidate at this point in time your loans, because then you only have one option for you as far as an income-driven repayment option. And it might be that the repayment assistance plan would be beneficial for you. I don't know that unless you run the numbers, right? But we have to think about, for those who are just going for the income-driven repayment forgiveness, that timeline is 30 years for the repayment assistance program versus 25 years of what it could be on the income-based repayment option.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the new repayment assistance plan, because that one's new and it's gotten some mixed reviews. I actually don't think it's as bad as people made it seem. That's my personal take on it, actually. And I actually think it's very similar to the old SAVE plan with a few caveats, but for the most part, I don't think it's that different from the SAVE plan for a lot of physicians, to be completely completely honest. The forgiveness timeline is different. If you're going for IDR forgiveness, right, instead of getting your loans forgiven in 20 or 25 years, it's 30 years. But I don't know a lot of physicians that are planning or banking on that anyway. With the new repayment assistance plan, it bases your payments on 10% of your adjusted gross income. So that is a big difference, right? Instead of basing your payment on your discretionary income, it bases it on your adjusted gross income. Technically speaking, it's a sliding scale of up to 10%, but for anybody who makes at least $100,000 a year, it will be capped at 10% of your adjusted gross income. So that's one thing about it. Another thing about it is that it actually provides a little subsidy for those whose monthly payments does not fully cover the interest that is accruing on the loans. So one of the things that used to really bug people about student loans is that the way interest is calculated for a student loan is very different from the way interest is calculated on any other loan you might have, whether it's a credit card or a car loan or even a mortgage payment, right? The loan isn't amortized in the same exact way. And because of that, most people's loan balance would increase dramatically over a short period of time. So you might have heard these stories of people saying, I paid whatever they told me I needed to pay each month, and my student loan is higher now than it was then. And that's because student loan interest accumulates in a different way. I won't get into the weeds on how it does that, but one of the things that you need to know is that for a lot of people who would pay minimal monthly payments or put their loans into forbearance during a period of time where they weren't making as much money, maybe they were in training or what have you, by the time they exited training, they would find that, oh, my loan balance went from $200,000 a year to $250,000 a year, or my loan balance went from $200,000 a year to $300,000 a year. That's not an uncommon story. And one of the things that this RAP plan, the Repayment Assistance Plan, the new RAP plan, however you want to say it, one of the things that it does is prevents that from happening. So if your monthly payment does not fully cover the interest that is accruing on your loans, they forgive any unpaid interest and they actually give you a $50 subsidy towards the principal. Your loan balance essentially should actually decrease slightly throughout the year. And, it's probably a nominal amount, but the point is it's not going to balloon. It's not going to grow. And so for a lot of people who are in training, or maybe you're not even a physician. You're like, I don't even know what this in training, out of training business means. If you're somebody who doesn't make as much money, let's just for simplicity's sake, say you're somebody who makes under $100,000 per year, you might really benefit from the repayment assistance plan, especially if you've got a pretty big loan balance, because it gives you this interest subsidy. It has this sort of cap that prevents your payment from drastically increasing. And, it bases your payment on 10% of your adjusted gross income. And like all of the income-driven repayment options, it allows you to exclude your spouse's income from the calculator if you file your taxes married filing separately from your spouse. And so these are some of the features of the new repayment assistance plan. Now, we all know whenever they come out with new plans, things don't run smoothly. Things don't operate as efficiently as you might think, right? There's glitches. They're like, oh, hold on, we made a mistake. Or, maybe they calculate things wrong. And so you have to be kind of prepared for that. But these are some of the basics of the repayment assistance plan. Brittany, you want to help people out with some of the other things to note about this plan?
Yeah, Leisha, I would say, because I'm like agreeing and disagreeing with you at the same time in my mind. So let me be explicit. So I think that the repayment assistance plan, what I agree is that it is not a horrible plan. It is not a horrible plan, right? So I think that for some people, it actually is a good plan, as you highlighted, the interest subsidy. So it helps your student loans from ballooning. And not only is that a mathematical benefit, but it's also a psychological benefit. Because I know so many people were like, I took out $100,000 and I can't believe now that this is $250,000. Like, what am I going to do? I have been doing nothing all of these years and look at what I got to pay now. They are completely overwhelmed and floored. Like, literally, I was on a call with someone who was in tears because the student loan balance had grown so much. So I think that aids a lot psychologically for those who want that interest just to be kind of wiped away. I also really appreciate the deduction is $50, but from a psychological perspective, seeing that loan, that principal amount decrease a little bit would be beneficial and helpful. So I think for those who are lower income, as you highlighted, it's a tiered percentage based on your income. So, for example, if you make very little money, your minimum payment would be $10, and then 1% up to $10,000, 2% up to $20,000, and y'all can continue. You see the patterns here. Up to $100,000, then anything above $100,000 is 10%. Now, for most physicians, for most APPs, advanced practice providers, you likely make above $100,000. And so for someone who might be a plastic surgeon, you probably should just pay it off if you're making that amount. But say you make $600,000. your student loan payment would be $60,000 a year based on the RAP plan because it has no cap benefit like the pay as you earn, like the new income based repayment, or like the old IBR legacy income based repayment, which is capped at the standard repayment amount, which basically just takes how much you would pay out for 10 years and divide it into fixed equal payments. So, with that, the amount that you have to pay can become substantial as you're balancing out your kids, purchasing your new home and trying to balance out your student loan. So, I think that that's one of the drawbacks because once you make $100,000, depending on how much you actually have in your student loans, your monthly payment is probably covering that interest. Okay, it might not be hitting the principal depending on how much you have and what the interest rates are, but it's likely covering a lot of that interest. So you might not at higher income thresholds actually benefit from the government subsidies and the principal subsidy.
I hear what you're saying. I hear some of these loan balances, Brittany, and I'm like, woo, woo. Some people have loan balances of 300,000, 400,000, and if their interest rate on those loans is 5%, 7%, then they're paying like 20K in interest. And it may not be as simple as that, some of these loan balances.
It depends on the numbers.
Yeah, it depends a lot on the numbers. But I hear what you're saying. One of the benefits of income-based repayment, that plan, whether it's the new IBR or the old IBR, one of the benefits of pay as you earn is that it has that cap, right? There is a cap to how high your payments can be. And so I think one of the general rules of thumb, if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, that sounds good, but what should I do? One of the things to keep in mind is that if you are somebody who makes a ton of money per year, a ton is relative, but let's say multiple six figures per year, you might really want to think about enrolling in one of those plans that has a cap or a ceiling on how high your payment can be, whether that's new IBR, old IBR, or pay as you earn. I would probably choose the one that's the cheapest, to be honest. But I would consider enrolling into one of those plans. Conversely, if you are somebody who is still in training, if you are somebody who makes around $100,000 per year or less, you might actually benefit from the subsidy that the RAP plan offers you. And so you might want to consider that one. Now, if you're going for public service loan forgiveness, right, you're not planning to work for a nonprofit for 10 years or whatever, and you are relying on some other sort of student loan forgiveness program or the regular income driven repayment forgiveness program, which plan you enroll in does matter. The RAP plan, you're not going to get your loans forgiven until you make 30 years of payments. Old IBR, I believe it's like 25 years of payments. Pay as you earn is 20 years of payments. And so if you're somebody who's like, Leisha, I don't qualify for public service loan forgiveness, and I'm just going to pay the minimum amount until those things get forgiven by the federal government in 20, 25, or 30 years, then which payment plan you select will dictate how long you got to keep paying on those loans. So that does matter. But I just don't know that many people that are planning on that. Most of the people I know are planning on public service loan forgiveness, some other sort of loan forgiveness program that isn't affiliated with the federal government, or they're planning to just pay it off themselves. And so I think that which plan you select really does depend on how much money you're making. If you're making a lower amount, you might benefit from this new plan that's coming out. If you're making a higher amount, you might benefit from enrolling into one of these plans that has a cap or a ceiling on how high your payment could be.
Yeah. And the one thing that I would just encourage everybody to do, which is like, Brittany, this is too complicated. But oftentimes I think we base our decisions on where we are today. And for many physicians in training, you might go through residency for 3, 4, 5, whatever number of years. Maybe you will tack on a fellowship after that, right? And so you just want to think about not only where you are today, but what does your income look like over the lifespan of the loan, and really sit with yourself to get clarity on what your goals are. If you do an income driven repayment option, they take into account possibly your partner's income. I've heard one of my colleagues, she got married, they had a ceremony, but they didn't do like the legal documentation because she didn't want her spouse's income to be included.
I had a similar story. Friends were like, should I get married this year or next year? Because they student loans. It's so funny how people's life decisions can be swayed
Yes.
by the student loans.
Yes, with the income driven repayment. I think that for me was the most freeing thing once I became an attending is that I didn't have to go through that mental gymnastics every single year because I refinanced my loan. It was on a fixed amount. I could budget for it. I didn't have to validate any other payments or income or anything like that. It was very freeing. I know some people actually have to do that because they're going for PSLF or they don't have the income. And so wherever you are, I think it's just really important for you to first get clear on what your goals are, to think about the lifespan of like what type of life you want to create for yourself, and try to make your student loans match that instead of the other way that Leisha and I just talked about, where your student loans are dictating kind of how you're living your life.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I know we're running short on time, but I wanted to give some people some options. So if you are somebody who's maybe still in training, you're making under $100,000 a year, you might benefit from this new repayment assistance plan. And so I would strongly recommend that you look into it, run the numbers, and see if that makes sense for you. If you are somebody who is married, you might want to strongly consider filing your taxes married filing separately so that you can exclude your spouse's income when calculating that student loan payment. Now, you and your spouse are going to have to run the numbers and figure out, is it better for you to save money on taxes by filing married filing jointly, or save money by lower student loan payments by filing married filing separately? And you're going to have to do that analysis. Our friends at Bonafide Finance, they help people run those numbers. And so if you need some assistance with that, they are happy to help you out. We'll include their link to their tax division in the show notes for you, but you might want to have to run that calculation. Another thing to consider is if you're somebody who makes a high amount of money, right, multiple six figures, you might benefit from choosing pay as you earn or one of the IBR plans because it has that cap. If you are somebody who is planning on public service loan forgiveness, and let's say you are close to it, maybe you're like, Leisha, I'm at 115 and I would be at 120, but I was stuck in this save forbearance. And so you've heard of the buyback plan where you're trying to buy back your months that you would have qualified and all of that. One of the things that I would advise you to do is fill out a new public service loan forgiveness, employer certification form, just so that they have on record that you worked for a nonprofit for a qualifying employer at the time of those months during the time period that you were in forbearance, and then submitting the forms that you need for buyback. My experience has been from a lot of people close to me is that people have been waiting over 2 years for buyback. And some people are getting it, but it's working at a very slow pace. And every time I look on the news, it seems like the Department of Education is cutting more jobs and they're trying to outsource more things. So I don't necessarily think that things are going to get more efficient. One of the things that I've kind of told ancillarily, a lot of my friends is if you've only got a few months of payments, honestly, you might benefit from just switching plans into pay as you earn or IBR and making the last few payments that you need. Because if you continue to wait on buyback, you might be waiting for a long time. And in the interim, your student loans might be switched into this student loan plan that doesn't even qualify for public service loan forgiveness. And so there's a lot of hassle there. Some people are like, Leisha, I really don't want to have to make these payments. You can put your loans into forbearance and continue to wait out buyback. But honestly, if you've just got 2 or 3 or 4 more payments or less than 10 payments, you might be better served by just switching into a new plan, making the last few payments that you need and being done with it, to be honest with you. If you're someone like me where you're going for public service loan forgiveness, but you still got a couple of years left, okay, well, now is the time to get strategic. I know for me, it's like, okay, I've got about 2 years that I've been stuck in this save forbearance that right now don't qualify for public service loan forgiveness. But my experience has been whenever there's a new person in the White House, whenever there's a Democratic president, they tend to right the wrongs of the prior administration and be like, oh, y'all are good. We'll give y'all credit for all this stuff. And I'm sort of banking on that, praying on that, hoping for that. And so for me, it's like, all right, I should be, only 1 year away or whatever. So for me, I'm going to enroll, I think, in the cheapest plan, which is like pay as you earn for me. And then hopefully when a new person gets elected into the White House, they right the wrongs and I can get credit for some of those other months. If they don't, it's fine. I'll just switch into whatever plan I qualify in the future. And so, I think your options may change based on how close or far away you are for forgiveness. One of the little caveats, and I'll probably do an entire episode on this, on student loan glitches and some of the things that I've noticed. But one thing I wanted to quickly mention here is that you can certify your income in different ways. And the federal government wants you to certify using tax statements. So when you log into studentaid.gov, one of the things that you will notice if you go to where the income-driven repayment options are and you start looking at, okay, I know I need to switch plans, and you start going through that process, they will ask you, do you want us to get information directly from the IRS? And the way they ask it makes it seem that they want you to click yes. And if you click yes in the past, they're not going to ask you about it again. And so for some people, they're like, oh yeah, I like that. I don't have to worry about recertifying my income each year because they're going to get the information directly from the IRS. I would encourage you not to do that because a lot of people's income tends to increase over time. And if you choose not to have them get the info directly from the IRS, you can still use prior tax statements or you can use pay stubs. It's not going to be certified automatically. You get a little bit more say so in it. Now, the downside of that is you got to remember when to certify your income. You're going to have to go in there and log in each year and remember when your recertification date is. But for a lot of people, it gives them more leeway because I've had a lot of questions of people who maybe they did get married. Maybe they did get a raise. I just had somebody ask me the other day, Leisha, I'm about to get a bonus or I'm about to get a raise in a couple months. How do I do this? And I say, okay, well, just don't allow them to get your information from the IRS. And then you can choose to upload last year's tax statements when your income was lower, or you can choose to upload your pay stub from this month when your income is lower. There's a button on there where it asks you, oh, you want to certify using pay stub, and you can upload your pay stub. In fact, if you're somebody who gets money in multiple sources, let's say you got your main job at the nonprofit that qualifies you for public service loan forgiveness, but then you're doing some gig work on the side, you do telemedicine, you do expert witness work, you work for pharmaceutical companies or whatever, you got multiple sources of income. You might actually benefit from uploading the pay stub from the nonprofit organization. You know what I mean? And so there's some little like nuances and caveats that might allow you to kind of lower your payments a little bit, if you will. And I'll kind of talk about some of these glitches and some of these kind of nuances in a different episode. But I wanted to make that crystal clear. You've got to take action. You have about 3 months to do so, or else they're going to move you automatically into a plan that does not qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So you're going to have to choose one of these plans. If you make a lower amount of money, you might benefit from the RAP plan. If you make multiple six figures, you should probably maybe consider choosing pay as you earn or IBR. If you're close to public service loan forgiveness, just choose a plan, pay your last few months of payments, and be done with it. If you're not close to public service loan forgiveness, you're going to have to be a little bit more strategic about what you do each year as your recertification date comes upon you.
Well, that was a mouthful. We covered a lot. So I hope that this was helpful for everyone and not super overwhelming. But, Leisha's always here. I'm always here. If you have any student loan questions, put them in the comments, reach out to us on Instagram, and we'll do what we can to kind of help to clarify any details.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I know that there are a couple of companies that do student loan consults for people who need some help running the numbers or need to think through some of these options because they've got all these complicated scenarios. Maybe they've got multiple student loan servicers. Maybe some loans qualify and some loans don't. I have a lot of stories of people who some loans are at 100 payments and some loans are at 110 payments. And they're like, Leisha, how is this possible? And so there are some vetted companies that we've worked with in the past that can run the numbers. I actually had created like a student loan calculator back in the day that took into account all of these nuances and actually used to do paid consults, but it just got so complicated and was taking a lot of my time. Like I was spending like an hour and a half doing these consults with folks. And I was like, I like helping you, but this is not cost efficient for me.
Hmm.
And so some of these companies, they have a lot more automated processes and there's different calculators that you can use. I mentioned that one of the challenges, Brittany, is that you can run the numbers and you can build the perfect calculator. But sometimes the website does not allow you to select it for whatever reason. And so you might have to end up calling your loan service or calling Mohila. You might have to end up navigating some of these nuances of like, it's supposed to work this way, but it's not. Or I'm supposed to have this option, but I don't. And, you're going to have to figure that stuff out. So it's a headache, honestly. And these are the times where I actually wish I didn't have student loans. People talk all the time about this whole pay off debt or invest. And a lot of financial advisors, a lot of people will say, why would you pay off your debt? Why would you pay off your mortgage? Why would you pay off your student loans? You should put that money in retirement accounts. You should invest instead. And I think this is a good case of like the mental load and the burden of having debt and how sometimes it limits your options and limits your freedom. Because there are some people that were like, okay, I chose this job because I was getting public service loan forgiveness and now I've been stuck in this forbearance and I've just wasted 2 years that didn't count. Or if I didn't have these loans, then I could take this other job that I really like a lot better. Or if I didn't have these loans, I wouldn't have this stress of trying to navigate and figure out all the student loan or payment options that tend to change each year. And so this might be like a good case scenario or an example of how sometimes paying down that debt can just provide you so much more ease and so much less stress. And I know you're probably feeling that on the other side.
That's a really great point. And that was one of the reasons why I paid off my student loans, because back in 2016, the numbers for PSLF were not very favorable. And I didn't know if the government was going to get its act together or not. So that's why I said, okay, I can bank on me. I can control me. And I've been speaking with residents. I've done some student loan consultations. And that same sentiment, that same uncertainty of, am I going to get my loans forgiven under PSLF, is something that I hear echoed often because of this new administration and what they're saying about revoking eligibility for certain employers based upon certain activities and who they serve. It's being litigated in the courts right now. I don't think that they have any legal standing, but I just say that to say that I just wanted to do away with all of the nuance and the uncertainty. And I just wanted to pay my debt and live my life. And that's what I was able to do. So maybe financially, it was not the best decision, but actually my loans were at a 6.8% interest rate. So like, I don't think it was a bad decision. Now, when I refinanced, then I took all that federal stuff and I had a lower interest rate. Honestly, I think it was one of the greatest decisions that I've made. But I know that that's not an option for everyone because their loan amount is so remarkably substantial compared to their income. And so they have no other option except for forgiveness unless they're going to like work a lot to pay them off, which I've seen also. So, long story short, there are many approaches to paying off your student loans. You really want to be clear on what you are willing to do and what you have to do. And you want to base it off of a mathematical decision and also a little bit of psychological stuff. But we would just encourage you to try to mitigate as much as you can the psychological so you can make a decision that's informed and logical for yourself.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I like that. And, I have student loans. And so when I switch plans, you all will hear about my experience. I actually went through the website and tried to navigate through switching plans just to get a sense for what that would be like. Like I said, I'll do probably a whole episode on student loan glitches and some of the stories that I've heard and how I've helped people kind of navigate different nuanced situations. So I'll do that in the future. But I want to say thank you, Brittany, for hopping on this pod with me and doing this episode. I know that student loans are near and dear to your heart. I know that you've been helping a lot of people with them, despite the fact that you no longer have them anymore. So we appreciate the service to the community that you have been doing. And maybe we will link in the show notes some sort of way for people to contact you if they need some assistance personally from you. All right, let's get into some fun money, girl. What are you spending your money on?
Ooh, I've been waiting for this segment. All right, Leisha, you know me. I am not as fun with my money as you, but I am going to a wedding.
Ooh.
My cousin's getting married. So got myself a new dress. And okay, we have a lot of women who listen to this podcast, but even for the men, you all understand what I'm about to say. Sometimes when you're trying on dresses, things fit differently, right? And so I was even looking at some shapewear. I was like, do I really need this?
Shapewear. Brittany, you're like a size 0. No offense, but like you are very slim. What?
I know, and that's where I was in my head. And looking at the shapewear, I'm like, this stuff is expensive. Do I really need this? Yes, I am a thin individual, but there are still places where I would like for them to be a little bit, more
Okay,
streamlined.
enhanced.
You'll
Noted.
understand
Noted.
I've had 2 kids. So So I didn't actually purchase the shapewear, but I do have the dress and I'm just going to be comfortable in my own skin. The kids purchase them some new gowns. KJ's going to be in this suit. Brooke she's in the wedding. So she has her flower girl dress. So I'm really excited to see us all glammed up and just having a good time at the wedding.
Aw, well, I hope you have a great time. Send us some photos. I also am purchasing new clothes, vacation clothes.
Mm.
Like, I have a lot of trips coming up. So, one of my friends, I was talking with her 'cause she's going on the trip with me. She was talking about how she bought new vacation clothes. And I was like, oh, I should too. I love a good dress, love a good sundress, love a good little 2-piece outfit, need a new bathing suit. I was just on there buying things like I had unlimited funds. Okay. So, hopefully, I enjoy the clothes. I'm like, ooh, let me put some caps on this. But yeah, so I too have been buying new clothes, not for a wedding, more for different summer trips and just the summer atmosphere. So I'm excited to wear those.
Yeah, you'll have to share your pictures as well and the quality pieces. I'm looking for some great quality pieces. So if you find some, then definitely let us know.
Will do. Will do. All right. Thanks again for joining us. Hopefully, our listeners found this helpful. And I can't wait to come back to them again next week.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Brooke. I'm recording a little disclaimer for Dr. Alicia Taylor. Just so you know, she's not a financial advisor, tax professional, lawyer, or financial planner. Everything you hear is for education and entertainment. It's not strict financial advice, So use your best judgment. Chat with a tax professional and all those other people that you need to talk to. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep cruising on your journey to wealth and wellness. Bye-bye.